This morning, we are welcoming to Madison Dr. Cara Grimes to give us our keynote. She is a professor of obstetrics and gynecology at Albany Medical College and the vice chair of research and faculty development in her department. She did her undergrad degree at Johns Hopkins, then spent 2 years doing Teach for America, and did her medical degree at Cornell and residency OBGYN training at Dartmouth and Johns Hopkins, and then did a urogynecology fellowship at UC San Diego and got a master's in advanced studies of clinical research. She has helped to foster a lot of other people's research careers as well through her work with SGS, the Society of Gynecologic Surgeons, where she holds a board position as the chair of research and guides really all of the research engines that come out of the SGS and mentor a lot of young researchers. So thank you for joining us, Dr. Grimes, and we'll turn it over to you.
All right. Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm really excited to be here. I went out to dinner with the Eurogyne team last night, and I told them that the last time I came to Wisconsin was 30 years ago when I was looking to come here for college. I didn't end up here, but that's my last memory. So it was kind of fun to see 30 years later. These are my disclosures, and these are my more relevant disclosures to the talk I'm going to give today. So I'm going to talk about kind of my experience doing research. I'm going to talk a little bit about my research journey that starts back in undergrad. It's meant to be a motivational talk, so I'm not going to get into like the nitty gritty of science and some of the research I'm actually doing. And then I will just couch this in that I'm a urogynecologist. So a lot of what I'm going to refer to, I'm going to talk about my urogynecology mentors. There are many people outside of urogyne who have supported me, but that's what I do. So that's what you're going to hear about a little bit. And I really appreciate all of their guidance. Having said that, while I've had a pretty successful career in research, I am not your typical academic researcher. I've had funding, but I'm not really an NIH-funded researcher. I've had little grants here and there. I definitely do not support my salary with funding. But I love research. I consider myself to be a research methodology nerd. I just like learning how to do things in new ways. And then ultimately, I'm a team player, and I think that's really how I've been successful in research and what I'm going to share with you today. These are the learning objectives for your CME credit. So I'm going to start by talking about why I think we do research as OBGYNs. Again, I'll talk about my journey. And I've come to think about research as a team. And I'm going to talk about who should be on your team so that we can successfully complete projects. It's always important to talk about sportsmanship when you do research. And then I'll conclude and just recap everything. All right, so let's dive in. So why do we do research? So I think of research as a team sport, and every sport up here is somehow connected to someone in my family, or I did it, so I just like to see that slide. Okay, I pulled this off the internet, but I think it makes a lot of sense. So it's a list of why children play sports and why children quit sports. And so I use that kind of as the framework to make my list of why we do research. So I am just going to read through these 8 things just to orient us, and then I promise I won't read slides for the rest of the talk. But so I think we do research, makes sense, to advance science. We do it because we want to network and be part of a team. I think we do it to increase our skill toolkit, and that's learning the methodology. Most of us do it to challenge ourselves. I think we do it to be like our role models. There's usually someone out there that we saw do research that we want to be like, that we're following in their footsteps. And then eventually you do it because you are a role model. We do it to hang out with our role models. And then ultimately, just like sports, we do a lot of practice and we learn how to do things, but we're doing this to win. And winning in OBGYN research is to graduate, to get into a residency or fellowship program that we want, to publish, and then to get promoted. So having said that, there's a lot of reasons why, as you progress through your career, research drops off or becomes less important. And these are my reasons that I think OBGYNs quit research, because we've all done research at some point in our career. But I think as time goes on, we don't do it because we are not sure how to do it. And that could start with, we just don't know how to get the IRB started, or we don't know how to design the study, or whatever it is, or it's just a feeling that we're not 100% sure. Lack of resources is very common. We don't know who to go to for stats help. We don't have funding. I think there's too much emphasis on the end product, the winning part, just like in sports, right? Like, I don't know if any of you have kids that play sports, but it's not about the team anymore. It's about winning. And I think that was different than I was when I was younger. And I think research is like that. There's, I think, too much emphasis on publishing, getting to the end, and grants. Um, Sometimes just no longer interested in the topic, right? We start a project, it seems really cool, we're very excited. It takes 3 or 4 years to get to the end, and we just aren't interested in the topic anymore. It's not fun, and most importantly, we don't have time, right? We can't give all our nights and all our weekends to research. But I want to argue that teamwork can help fight back against these reasons. All right, so I'm going to just talk a little bit about my research journey. It's not necessary to talk about the specific work I've done, but really just to kind of put this in context and hopefully inspire students or residents. Even if you haven't really gotten involved in research, it's never too late. So again, like I mentioned before, I don't really consider myself a typical researcher. I love to do research, and it's always been a part of my career, but really I'm more of a clinical person. But I love teaching. I love mentoring. I always have 4 or 5 or 30 projects going at once that I'm mentoring. And then I've just been lucky over time because I've been in the right place at the right time. And I'll show you some examples where I just knew how to do something. A situation came up and we were able to respond because I had a good network and collaboration. And we were able to answer some really important clinical questions that were very timely. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of talk through undergrad to medical school to residency, all the way up to some society opportunities. And as I do that, I'm going to thank my mentors, my coaches. So I am not here because I got here alone. So many people have supported me on the way. I'm going to try to thank many of them. There's no way I can thank all of them because I had to kind of pare this down. All right, so when I went to undergrad, no idea that I was going to be a urogynecologist, right? You just know I want to go to medical school, right? So I just took whatever research opportunity came my way. I measured brain ventricles. I sat in like a basement in the radiology department measuring ventricles. I studied growth factor in Kaposi sarcoma, and I also did some work with craniopagus twins. And I was very lucky to meet some really amazing people who kind of started to sprinkle the research bug. I got a couple papers, so that's great. That was my winning as an undergrad. I probably cannot talk to you about the one on the right very intelligently anymore, right? And don't look at the date, it was a very long time ago. Okay, then I went to medical school, and I want to throw this out to any students here. I did 0 research. I was just surviving. I was proud that I got into medical school. I know that the research I did in undergrad got me there, but I just couldn't find the time or the interest. And somehow I still have research as part of my career now. So I throw this slide up just to share that. And then I went to residency. And I will say, residency was really hard. And we focused on just getting the clinical work done. So my first priority was just surviving. But through that, just being in clinic and in the OR, I got introduced to many topics that we started to research. So things that were interesting or that we had questions about, I started to do projects. So LPP, that's a Urogyne thing, leak point pressures. I started asking questions about slings, colpal paraneopexy, obstructed defecation, which became one of my research loves, and then vaginal fluid. I mean, just weird things, but they start with conversations that you have in clinic or in the ward. So one of the first things I did at residency was this paper on inter-observer reliability of like your wet preps. And that was really fun because you learn research methodology and some stats. Then I started getting into obstructed defecation. So actually going back to this one, I was just a teammate, right? So I don't even know where my name is, but it's like toward the end of all these people. So I was not the mentor, that was Dr. Whiteside. So I was not the coach. I was not the captain, but I was a teammate. Here is one of the first papers where I became like the team captain, like first author. And it was just a retrospective study, but I had really great coaches, good mentors. And then those things got me, I think, into urogynecology fellowship. And urogynecology felt is a little bit more structured in terms of research. So my thesis was on defecatory dysfunction in the posterior vaginal wall. So I spent a lot of time thinking about how we poop and how prolapse affects that. And these were some of my coaches, some of my mentors. And then I was also very lucky when I was in fellowship to be able to do a master's in really the nuts and bolts of research. And if anyone has the opportunity, I think it's very, very useful. And it definitely helped get my interest and helped secure my skills in research methodology. So these are some of the papers that came out, and these were ones that I was team captain for. I throw this slide up because I think it's funny. So like I told you, I don't really consider myself doing serious NIH-funded research, but I ask clinical questions that we talk about every day. One of the things is there a way to measure this back wall of the vagina, this prolapse, and figure out like which one is worse or how it impacts symptoms? And so we spent a couple years trying to figure out how to measure the posterior wall. And you kind of laugh at this now, right? So the first one's us just putting our finger in, trying to see if there's like some stretchiness that we can figure out. We inflated Foley bulbs in their bottom. That's B. A little weird, but it's it's interesting looking for like a pocket or like something that you can measure. C is like just grabbing it with an Alice, which I wouldn't recommend doing now. And then the forceps method was as you spread the forceps apart, like can you reduce the prolapse? So lots of fun things, like research can be really fun and interesting. And then the other thing that really changed the course of my career was in fellowship, I learned about collaboration. And that's something that sticks with me today. So hopefully you guys have heard about the Society of Gynecologic Surgeons. So it's a great society, and I'm going to plug it a lot during this talk. It is open basically to anyone who graduates OBGYN residency. And we have amazing research engines. So when I started, we had the FPRN, which is the Fellows Pelvic Research Network, which is just open to fellows of any gynecologic subspecialty. And then we also had the Systematic Review Group, and we do have residents who join us, or general OBGYNs. And if you are interested, I will give you my contact information at the end as you learn more about these. But in urogynecology, I joined these two groups. And that was kind of my first taste of working outside my institution to get research projects done. And then the real world comes. And so I joined my first attending job. So here I joined one other urogyn, amazing guy. His name is Dr. Jody Blanco. And he was very clinical and not really interested in research. The department I was in is the research powerhouse, but just wasn't really happening in urogyn or benign GYN research. So now I had to learn how to collaborate within my institution. So Dr. Wapner and Dr. Wright are an MFM and an oncologist who really helped me develop a program at this institution. And what came out of that was I actually developed something called the CORE, which is a collaborative research and pelvic surgery consortium. And originally it was just a group of really 5 of my buddies from fellowship that, we'd been dispersed around the country. One of them was actually Dr. Brown, who was here. And so Wisconsin was one of the first institutions in the CORE. And we just didn't really have enough volume or enough resources at each of our institutions. And so we banded together and we got lots of work done. And then we had Dr. Glazier, Richter, and Kenton on the right who mentored us and coached us through this. So originally it was just like a group of us working together. The other thing, I'll see if I can play this, see if you can see it, but it's going, yeah. While I was at that first job, this is where I started learning to respond quickly and answering questions. So I don't know, does anyone know what indigo carmine is now? I feel like it's gone and most people, the young ones don't know. My residents just look at me and they don't know what it is. But 15 years ago, this was how we evaluated ureteral patency, right? We gave indigo carmine. It was everywhere. It was a blue dye. I'll keep playing this if you want to keep watching. But and there was a problem about, I guess it was 2012-ish, that it went off the market. Right? There's some supply chain issues, and then they had trouble. They had to get FDA approved to get back on, and it just came back in the last 3 or 4 years, and now it's called Lutigo. But it was pretty sudden when it went off, and like all the urogyns were like, what are we going to do now? Right? Like, how are we going to evaluate ureteral patency? And so I just did a quick RCT. It was one of the first ones I did outside of fellowship, and we just randomized subjects to different methods of evaluation. The one I have here, I don't know if anyone's seen it. It's subtle, but this is mannitol installation, right? So this is actually pretty old. There it goes. So it's a pretty old method that urologists used to use for prostates and prostate resections. And so it's very available in OR. And if you look, it's a hyper viscous solution. So when the ureter jets, you can see it. And that one, I just have that video because it ended up being the one that surgeons were most satisfied with. I wouldn't say that everyone uses it now, but that was a fun thing to do. Oh, now it's not advancing. There we go. So that's where I started to learn how to collaborate. I knew that I liked research methodology and learning how to do it. I'm a joiner. I love being a part of a team. Um, and at that point, I transitioned the core and we basically gave it to the Society for Gynecologic Surgeons. So now it's a research engine that lives in SGS, and now it's definitely open to a lot more people to join. And then COVID happened, right? And during COVID, as a urogynecologist, they didn't really need me that much, right? Like we sat there waiting to be pulled in to do things, but instead the role that I filled was helping the medical students and the residents and the faculty do research, all the people who weren't like on the front lines doing things. We started doing a lot more research. And so I was able to pull on some of these established networks and we started responding to current questions. So this was the first example. So I don't know if you can read those dates, but like COVID was mid-March, I think. We brought a group together, the systematic review group, and by April 6th, we had completed a systematic review trying to understand what do we do now? Like, how do we treat our patients? Can we use telemedicine? Because back then, no one knew how to use telemedicine, at least I didn't. And so we reviewed the literature so we could better understand how to use it effectively for our patients. And we published a systematic review, and it was published by the end of April. And I think this was another example of responding quickly and really, really being helpful. But hopefully you're seeing a thread that like, I don't really have one research topic I study, right? That's what makes me very atypical. I just kind of go with whatever's coming up. Someone, I don't love the way they refer to this, but I've been told it's pop research, right? I think it's fun. And all of a sudden I'm an expert in something that literally 3 weeks ago, I didn't even know what it was. This is another example of where we responded. So we brought a group together. This was also done through the core. Well, done through SGS, not the systematic review group, but now the core. And we did a qualitative study looking at presidents of societies and trying to understand how they thought the Dobbs decision was going to impact residencies. And then we followed this up a year later. There's another one where we responded. A couple years ago, there was some sexual harassment accusations at ACOG that and SGO that you may remember. So we came together and put together a systematic review about sexual harassment OBGYN. It's a pretty depressing read, but it's out there if you want to look at it. Okay, so now what do I get to do with all that background and just kind of doing different things along the way? Now I have this wonderful job where my job is I get to teach others how to do research. I get to organize the teams. I get to bring people together. I'm not personally highly funded, but I get to help other people find funding and help bring the funding into our department. I get to network across institutions and also nationally. And I get to do a little bit of fun research too. So lots and lots of ways to do research and be successful. I'm also the chair of research for SGS. And now we have those 3 research engines that live in SGS. All right, so now let's talk about how I think about the research team, okay? So I think of it like a sports team. And I'm sure there's no Orioles fans in this room, but oh, really? Yay, okay. And it's a 1999 Orioles team that was my favorite, but I couldn't find it on the internet anymore. It's hard to find old pictures. But I think of the research team as a sports team. So you have your coach, right, which is the leader of the team. It's probably your principal investigator. It's your last author, okay? You have the coaching team. You can think of these like your mentors. So they might be probably the end of the authorship list, right? And they might just come in for stats help or research methodology help. You have a team captain. That's usually your first author. And this is someone who's probably not doing research for the first time, but probably not ready to completely do it by themselves and still need a lot of guidance and mentorship. And then there's your teammates. And there's so many positions to play in research that you need lots and lots of teammates. And then, of course, the IRB and patients and subjects. But I'm going to really focus on the core team here. Okay, so let's get back to the coach. So again, this is your senior author. I think of this person as they should have some skill and some track record, right? They don't need to completely understand the topic. They don't need to be NIH funded and the absolute best researcher, but they have to have published a little bit. They know how to close. They know how to get a study to the end. They're usually better at teaching and leading. And I think their role in the team is they set the game plan and the playbook. So they're in charge of moving the project along, dropping in if it's getting derailed or if the teammates maybe don't understand how to analyze the results or what they mean. They're the ones who are kind of dropping in and helping to explain it. And they're not an Olympic athlete, right? They don't necessarily have to be the best researcher at your institution. They just have to have some skill and track record. Okay, and then you've got your coaching team. And I think this is really important and something that maybe gets missed when we're putting our research teams together. Like I find that often a medical student will come to a faculty, just some random faculty, be like, can I do research with you? And try to make this like two-pair team. And it doesn't work very well often. And I think sometimes it's because the medical student doesn't know how to pick a good faculty mentor, and that's a whole nother talk I can give. And the faculty member doesn't have the time or sometimes the knowledge on how to get this idea to the end, but bring other people in, right? So you need to have your methods experts, right? So often a faculty is not sure exactly how to design an inferiority trial, but they know that's what they need. Pull someone in who can help you. I get approached by a lot of students who want to do OB research. I went to OBGYN residency. I know a little bit, but I don't always know if it's the right perfect clinical question. So I bring an MFM expert in and help us out. Stats experts, and the thing to see here is that these are often peers to the coach, right? So they might be my colleagues. Sometimes they're people I've mentored, and sometimes they're people who mentor me. But usually there needs to be a few senior people on your team to help it move along. All right, and then teammates, obviously. So these are the people who practice, put in the work. And if you have lots of teammates on your research team, it brings advantages, right? It brings diversity. So we all have different life backgrounds. We have different skills. Like medical students come in and they worked in IT or they worked in an insurance company. They know how to do stats or they know how to code, and they can bring a lot to the team. I like to have a research team that's filled with students, residents, fellows, and faculty. I think there should be one person from every learning strata in our team. So teammates are my favorite. And I, in general, think lots of people on the team are better. And then the team captain is that student, resident, or fellow who's going to own the project. They're usually the first author. All right, so that brings us to sportsmanship. And I think that comes up a lot, both in sports and also in research. And I think I just have, oh yeah, okay. So if you're gonna put together a team, we all have some roles. If you're gonna be at the coaching staff, so those are your mentors, your clinical mentor, your stats mentor, your research methodology mentor, and that last author position. So it's important that you give your time. And so I will tell any student, resident, fellow who approaches me, you get 15 minutes and we'll talk through the project. And then when they write back with questions, you got 15 minutes, you just have to give them a little bit of time, and they don't need a lot. So I make that a priority. You got to follow through. So if you're going to start a project with a team, the coaching staff is who makes sure it gets finished. And that's the person who makes the hard decisions. It's sometimes removing teammates, bringing other people on, making the authorship decisions. When the project's getting derailed, bringing people back. So their job is to keep the momentum going. They model sportsmanship. And then also very, very importantly is the team's still practicing, right? We're learning as we go. So often the teammates don't know how to do the stats or whatever part it is, or how to even like prepare your data collection sheet. And that's the coaching team will come in and guide. And then importantly, we don't know everything and no one expects us to know everything. So it's also really important that the coaching staff ask for help. So your team looks at you as if you have all the answers, but you don't. So you should feel pretty comfortable about finding someone else to come in and help. All right, similarly, how do you be a good teammate? Same things. You got to show up. You got to be at those research meetings. Often the teammates have other responsibilities and they're not usually in charge of their own schedule, right? So if you can't go to that meeting, you send an email, check in, report back what you did. It's just being visible, right? Many teams, there's like 2% that kind of falls off and you don't really know what happened to those teammates. And that's the coaching staff and the teammates themselves to kind of make sure that we follow through and know what's going on. You should know what your role in the project is. and what your self goals are. And similarly to the coaching staff, it's okay to ask for help. So what I really encourage fellows, residents, and medical students is if you aren't sure, take a stab at it, right? You're not really sure how to set up those tables, try them and then come to your coach. Like do a little bit before you bring it to your coach to show that you're trying, and you'll find out that you probably learn a lot by doing it that way. And then respect the time given by your coaching staff, right? Because most of us are doing this on nights and weekends. We're squished in between patients. And so if you ask for 15 minutes, show up to it, ask questions, be prepared. And then this is kind of a summary, but what can everyone do so that the team goes well? So again, show up, communicate, right? So, like you can't play sports, you can't play soccer if you're not communicating. If everyone's out there just doing their own thing, the team's not going to score that goal. Delineate what the roles are, share your time commitments. So that to me means like if you're a resident and you're like, okay, the next 6 weeks I'm going to be on nights. I'm telling you ahead of time because I am not going to get my work done. I think that's fine, right? But you communicate it ahead of time, and then I think of it like passing the ball. So I can't get this next part of the project done. I'm going to pass the ball to this other teammate who's going to carry it along. Respect your team. So while we are doing a lot of work on nights and weekends, it's not okay to submit something to your coach Friday night because it's due Saturday morning. I mean, like, plan ahead, respect the time of others, follow the timelines, meet your deadlines, and then every single person on the team has a role in not letting this project fail. You owe it to your team to cross the finish line. And then the fun part, right? Celebrate success. So share, tell everyone that you succeeded. Sometimes these papers just get published and no one knows, or it like shows up on like a publications list in the department. These should be emailed to everybody, let everyone know what happened, acknowledge every single person on your team. The big picture way I think about credit is everyone who touched a project at any point gets on the abstract, right? No question, just it can have 20 names, almost every place will let you do that. Manuscripts, there are some criteria. And that brings me to this authorship agreement. You guys probably have something similar. This is the one that we put together. So for every project, we're starting it. We usually try to do this at the like filing the IRB stage or right before data collection started, but kind of early at the beginning. And then you revisit it. Usually the coach has to revisit about every 3 months because teams change. So we write down who the lead student is, who your team captain is, who your lead faculty, that's your principal, investigator, your coach. If you have more than one, you would write those names in. Corresponding author. And then it's just stated here, anyone who is part of the group work and approves the final abstract will be listed on the abstract submissions. And I think that's important for students and residents. You touched it, you're on it. But to be on the manuscript, there are certain things that you have to meet depending on the journal, and these are the ones from the Green Journal. And I think it's good for people to know ahead of time, right? Because I have lots of students work really hard at the beginning. You know, they help get the IRB submitted and they collect half the data and then they disappear and they are not around for writing a manuscript. And it's very difficult to put them on if they don't do that final read through the manuscript and approve it. What's not on here is on the back, I write everyone's personal email addresses, right? Because you have that like fourth year student who graduated, you really want to give them credit, but then they're not, you can't find them. Or the same thing with a resident, they went off and they're usually a little easier to find. But if they are not available to sign that last COI for the journal or read the projects, often they get left off, and that's just not fair. Okay, so I do this at the beginning, and then usually about every 3 months the project goes, we just revisit it, and it's the job of the coach to arbitrate anything. All right, now I'm going to go through some successful teams. Again, I'm a Eurogyne, so I'm sure there are many successful teams here, but these are the ones that I know about and was a part of. So Dr. Giles, right? So I don't even remember when we first met, but probably through Dr. Brown, maybe before. And I don't even remember how I pulled you into this project, but I probably just called you up and told you were going to do it. But I know that he had some interest in finance and knew like a little bit more than I did. And I had this great team of medical students who was looking at charge masters, which are price listings that every hospital has to publish. And now insurance companies have to do it as well. And we were trying to like make sense of this. And we had compiled all the charge masters from 5 states across the country. And trying to see if there was like patterns and just trying to make meaning of it. And we needed someone who like understood the data, right? Like I knew how to get the data and do stats on it, but then you have all this like gibberish. You're like, what does this mean? So Dobie comes in and he was our coaching team. So he was our expert on that. And these are 2 papers and a bunch more coming. So thank you. Dr. Heiser also, I met her through SGS, and she was a member of the Corps, or still is a member of the Corps, and she did at least these 3 papers to the Corps. There could be more. So she did like a RCT on a smartphone administration of some of our common surveys. She worked on PORS, which was this return to sexual activity after pelvic reconstructive surgery that actually has a series of articles that are coming out. And then there was some challenge. We had like a series of challenging cases in the Blue Journal that were published, and she was on those as well. So she was a great teammate. And then Dr. Pennycuff. So he is big in the systematic review group at SGS. He's done a lot of work there. He published these 2 systematic reviews as a teammate, and now he is currently the team captain for one. And I hope he's listening, but he needs to, good job. He's gonna finish this at SGS in a couple weeks. Yeah. Yeah. But that's his project. He's leading it, and it's been fun to see like the teammate to team captain progression. All right, so I'm going to kind of recap and go back. So why do we do research? All those reasons. One big one is we get to hang out with our role models. So I got to come here, talk to you guys. They took me out to dinner last night. I get to give this talk all around the country. It's one of the fun things I get to do. So there's all these other reasons that we do research, not just that final publication. Great relationships, great friends and colleagues. The Zoom on the bottom was like in the middle of COVID, right? You just like need a connection. And we got all our systematic review group friends, and we did this whole project on COVID. And at the end, we, had like a little happy hour because there's nothing else to do, right? So all these connections wouldn't have happened without research. And then just going back to why we quit. So like, well, I tried to make this fun and inspiring and like show you that you can really study anything. The truth is research is hard, and you have to acknowledge that. All these things are always going to be true, and they're going to be true for different projects at different stages. But I do think having a team helps. If you think about projects that you've been involved in, anything that at least for me, anything I tried to do by myself, right? Like there's that resident project that you just tried to sit in a corner in between patients and like extract data from the charts, and you try to do it yourself. Those do not succeed, right? You need other people working with you. You need a good coach that moves it along. It's very hard to be a sole researcher doing this by yourself. So get your team together. I promise that's going to help you complete things. You're not in this alone. And then just a couple more slides. So there's still, despite all that and having a good team, like people are still hesitant to do research. And so there's other ways to kind of get involved, right? I think having a joiner attitude is important. I will take the resident, the fellow, the medical student who wants to be on my team way more than I would take someone who's like, oh, I know how to do stats, I'm an expert, but this seems dumb, like just coming in with enthusiasm, I'm gonna work. I don't know what I'm doing, but tell me what to do and I'll do it. That's the most important thing. Go to research meetings. I'm sure there's research meetings in the different divisions. Drop in and just see what other people are doing. Seek mentorship. That can be peer mentorship. Maybe there's a resident who's doing really cool things. Ask them how they did it, who they talked to, who's on their team. It could be outside. Some of my best mentors are not at my institution. They're around the country. Serving as a journal reviewer, I think, is a great way to do this too. And residents can do that. You can be a journal reviewer now, or if you're not comfortable doing it by yourself first, go find someone and pair with them. Make it a goal to find a faculty mentor, do 2 or 3 like co-peer reviews so that when you graduate, you can review for the Green Journal, right? It's a great first step. Join committees and mentor others. Even if you feel like you don't know enough to do research, you know something and you can teach somebody else. How else can I get started? So just wander about something. when you're sitting on the ward, in the clinic, on labor and delivery, just come up with a question. Most of my questions were just things like, what are we gonna do now, right? Indigo Carmine's gone. We can't see our patients because we're on lockdown. What are we gonna do? Start coming up with these questions and then you can assemble your team to answer them. Sometimes you're just interested in a topic. So I was interested in obstructed defecation. You just read about it, ask questions, talk to other people. And then another way to get into research that I actually like a lot, and it's kind of, as I've gone in my career, become a bigger part of it, is what do I not know how to do? Right? So along the way, I learned how to do surveys, qualitative studies. I didn't really understand what those were. And in the last 3 or 4 years, I've learned by doing them. And I think it's very interesting. And that's a nice, easy methodology that like you can get a team together to work on. Systematic reviews, I didn't know how to do that. Joined a group and now I feel like I've become an expert in that. And then maybe you just want to do an RCT or case control study, just like learning how to do it. And then here, this is my strand of pearls, so just kind of the points I hope you got as I talked through it. I'm not going to read this slide, but the point is that research is fun. I love it. Hopefully, if you come to it thinking that you're not by yourself and that you can bring a team member in, and then those of us who do a lot of research can go back to our teams and think, oh, can I strengthen this a little bit? Can I bring other people in? Where did I get stuck? Would a team help me move it forward? And then that's my email. Please use it. I'm happy to connect people to join the systematic review group or the core, or when you're fellows, the Fellow Research Network at SGS. And if you have an idea, I'm also happy to collaborate with you at any point. And good luck to the residents today. Now I'm really excited to hear about your work. Thank you.
And I'm working with Dr. Heisler on a project with CORE right now.
Oh,
with a
awesome.
colleague at
Pores?
Harvard.
Oh, which one's
Uh,
that?
Janine.
Oh, on the gender disparity, that one?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so I didn't know about it before we started the project, and it seems like a great resource and collaborative and
Yeah, welcome.
very generative. So we have some time for questions. Do we have any, none online? Yes.
This is not a question, but just I'm not a big fan of research. I just struggle. I do. And working with Dr. Grimes on these projects was probably the most rewarding research projects I've ever done. Just to sit and watch how she would literally, that whole team sport thing was so impressive and it really got me going of wanting to do more research, which is something I never thought I would say out loud. So even if you don't feel comfortable doing it, I think connecting with somebody who can help stimulate you and help you develop is a very key thing. And the last thing is the core that was a pet project of some friends is now part of a medical society. So even a pet project can develop and put out some amazing research. So I think some kudos for that is well.
Thank you.
So I have a question.
Mhm.
My role in the department is to help people do their research. I'm part of the support in the department and with the resident projects as well. So one thing that is hard to navigate is when there are problems with the team, either communication or time commitment or, and there's a power dynamic a lot of times. And sometimes it's the coach having problems with teammates, and sometimes it's teammates having problems with coach. So can you talk a little bit about how to navigate those?
Yeah, I'm not going to be able to tell you all the answers because then like life would be perfect and we'd always have functioning teams. Ultimately, I think that does lie with the coach, but it's I cringe a little bit when you said the coach has problems with the teammates, right? Because that's the hardest thing to navigate, but that's when you bring in other people. So that's when you need a coaching staff who can help you navigate relationships. So maybe it's not a research person, maybe it's someone who can help you with team dynamics. But I think a coach who's managing the project well will help with the communication, right? So if communication is falling apart, I think you have to go back and say, why is it falling apart? So, everyone runs this differently, but I sit down the first of every month and I run through my projects. And it's a lot. It can be 30 to 40 to 50, depending on what's going on. And I touch base usually with the team captain, right? And depending on the project, maybe I put everybody on, but there's just got to be that coach to the rest of the team, just communication. What's the status? What's going on? When's our next deadline? You probably know this, we never leave a meeting without the next meeting already set up. And everyone's got a specific task. So a good coach moves it along. If the coach is not getting along with the team, that's a tough one, and I don't totally have the answer to that. Maybe someone here does, but bring in help. A microphone there, that's so cool. I love it.
You can throw it.
It's so cool.
Thanks for your talk. So I feel like there are people in the world who either start a book and have to finish it, or
Yeah.
are happy to put it down if they lose interest, or turn to another book. How do you feel about research projects? Because as I think back to like all the ones that I've been a part of, starting way back, there are some that are still being like, there's efforts still to publish, even though they're now 7 years old. The data is maybe less relevant. It's maybe there was like mistakes in the methodology and the design that are, that are regretted by the team members. So yeah, how do you navigate
Yeah.
those?
Well, I used to think that every project had to be published and that's how you won, right? And then watching, right? That was the goal. And then watching my kids, like some of them are on very competitive sports teams and some of their sports teams lose all the time, right? And it's not about the winning or the losing, it's about the teamwork and the learning and the process. So if there's a project that's not going to cross the finish line, you have to take a step back and evaluate, what did we accomplish, right? Maybe we just presented at like a college research day. Great. We shared our knowledge. Or maybe you walked away and you learned how to do a survey or whatever it was. The hardest thing is to call time of death on a research project, and I've done it. And the coach comes in and you try to bring, like, can we bring another? It's usually the team captain, I think, that needs help when a project is dying. So can we bring another team captain in? Can you pass the ball to somebody else? But there comes a point where the coach has to come in and say, this project's done, but recap, this is what we learned, this is what we got out of it. How can we, like with students, I'll say, the project didn't get done, but I'm gonna write you a letter of recommendation that talks about the process and how you did. Like there's always some winning that comes out of it, and it's just identifying what that is. But I can't save every project.
I really like that. There's a lot of guilt and feeling like you've invested so much, but looking for the wins and relieving yourself of that monster on your back.
Yeah. Give yourself permission.
I already have the box too. I was going to ask how you feel like in your experience, you've most effectively built research teams. So does your institution have like a central clinical research office that you can pull staff from, or have you built your teams more organically from people that you've already mentored or students that you've worked with or people that approached you, or is it kind of a hodgepodge of everything that's built your best teams?
It's a hodgepodge. Even if I'm pulling people from like an established research structure, I usually start with someone coming to me with an idea and I say, oh, that sounds great, but I know nothing about it. Let's bring in these people. And we just start developing it that way. I think one of my skills is I'm a good connector and I know people and I know who to bring in. And when I don't know someone, I go meet them and figure it out. But so I usually start from the ground up, not like going through like the research structure at my institution.
So I've been both a coach who felt like the team was fizzling and also one of the flaky team members.
Yeah, we all have.
Can you discuss strategies in like both of those situations of, because often I think flaky team member, it's time management, but then like as a coach, how to like get your team together without either A, harassing them or just like dropping them, because I think both of those are hard.
Yeah, I mean, I think a little harassment's not the right word, but a little gentle pressure is okay and needed. Um, and I tend to set like really specific expectations, and I don't necessarily think every coach has to, but when I meet with students, I talk about like, you're part of the team, it's okay. You don't know your schedule, so you don't know when your lecture is going to be in like those 2 weeks. Like you may not know until the 2 weeks are happening that you're not going to be able to get the project done. But I'm telling you now that you have to communicate with me and let me know. One time I'll forgive, and the second time we're going to have to talk about like continuing on the project or your role in the project. And I think that's most important with the team captain, like the person who's like trying to own the project. If they miss a couple deadlines, that's a conversation where we say, well, who can you pass that ball to, either just for the short period of time or permanently? Like, you owe it to the whole team to keep playing the game and move it along. What are we going to do? So just direct communication. I flaked on things too. I mean, it happens. We're people, and you come back and like, oh, like that the list of the 30 that I'm emailing. You don't always get to the bottom, right? So sometimes I have to come back and like, oh, I forgot this person. What's going on? And try to make that connection and apologize. Yeah, we're people.